Welcome back. Today we're going to talk about how to have deeper conversations. Now, we all navigate the world of small talk, don't we? It's kind of like the conversational warm up, talking about the weather, what you did last weekend, maybe the news. It's useful, yeah, and necessary sometimes just to break the ice and ease into things. But let me ask you honestly, how often do you walk away from one of those chats feeling like you really connected? Or like you got some kind of real insight into the other person, what makes them tick? Or maybe even shared something truly meaningful about yourself. For a lot of us, I think that feeling can be a bit, well, superficial, just pleasantries, leaving you wanting something more.
Oh, absolutely. It's a pretty universal feeling, isn't it? That desire for genuine connection, for conversations that actually stick with you, that resonate afterwards. Because the real magic, well, it happens when you go past that predictable surface stuff. That's really the ground where friendships actually grow, where trust builds in professional relationships. And it's where you genuinely start to understand someone else's unique perspective, their motivations, dreams, struggles. It's where empathy stops being just a word and becomes like a shared experience.
Totally. And this whole thing about wanting deeper conversations, it can sometimes hit a particular snag, especially if English isn't your first language. You might feel like you've got the grammar down, you've built up a decent vocabulary for facts and figures. But how do you actually navigate that trickier territory? Human emotion, complex ideas. How do you ask the kind of questions that gently open things up without feeling like you're being nosy or intrusive? Or how do you show that you genuinely get it, show empathy, not just, nod along politely while waiting for your turn to jump in? This isn't just about speaking perfectly correct sentences, is it? It's about real interaction.
That's exactly it. And that's why this whole exploration is, I think, so important. Think of what we're doing today as maybe a kind of map to that conversational territory. It can feel a bit uncharted sometimes. Our mission, really, is to equip you with the right language tools, the specific words and structures for curiosity, for real empathy, and maybe even that bit of courage for vulnerability. Because, true fluency goes way beyond just perfect grammar. It's really about being able to share who you are, your authentic self, articulate your inner world, and just as importantly, to really engage deeply with the inner world of others. It's about building bridges with words, not just, reciting lines.
Right. So if you're feeling ready to move beyond the weather chat and dive into conversations that feel more meaningful, more impactful, well, you're in the right place. We're aiming to give you the actual language tools to do just that, to help turn your English conversations into pathways for real connection. Okay, so let's start unpacking this. When we talk about deeper conversations, we're definitely not just talking about swapping facts, what's your job, where are you from, that kind of thing. And look, that stuff is essential, right, for basic info, setting a baseline, but it rarely gets you to that genuine human connection, the kind that actually builds bonds, fosters real understanding. For that, we need a different set of words, a different vocabulary. Words that aren't just descriptive, but they kind of carry meaning, they invite reflection, empathy, introspection.
That's a really crucial distinction. That shift in vocabulary changes the whole game. It moves the conversation from being purely, let's say, transactional, like I give you info, you give me info, to being truly relational. When you consciously decide to use words that express these deeper concepts, you're actually sending a pretty powerful signal. You're basically saying, look, I'm interested in more than just the surface stuff. I'm interested in you. You're inviting them to share their internal world thoughts, feelings, beliefs, not just their job title or where they live. And this change, just focusing on the vocabulary, it elevates the whole interaction, makes it way more rewarding for everyone involved.
Okay, so let's lay some groundwork. Let's talk about some of those key nouns, key concepts, because these really are the building blocks for these richer discussions. Getting comfortable with these words gives you the precision you need for that complex, emotional, intellectual terrain. First up, let's talk about perspective or point of view. This isn't just about what someone sees, but how they see it, right? Their unique angle. It's colored by their experiences, their beliefs, their values, all of that. So instead of just stating a fact, maybe you say something like, okay, I understand your perspective on this, even if I see it a bit differently. That simple phrase, it acknowledges their unique viewpoint, validates their experience, without you necessarily having to agree with the conclusion. It's like that classic example, looking at a mountain from different sides. Still the same mountain, but your view is totally unique depending on where you stand.
That mountain analogy is
Ah,
spot on. It's so vital because, think about it, so much misunderstanding, whether it's personal stuff or work stuff, it comes from this unspoken idea that everyone sees things the exact same way, shares the same perspective. Using the word perspective explicitly, It just opens the door. It lets you explore those differences. It helps bridge those gaps in understanding instead of just, talking past each other. It shows a genuine curiosity about how someone got to their conclusion, not just what it is. That's a big shift.
Yeah, the how. Then there's insight. This isn't just like a bit of information. It's more profound, isn't it? A deeper understanding, maybe a sudden aha moment that connects things or reveals something deeper. Like finding that missing puzzle piece that suddenly makes the whole picture make sense. You might say, wow, that's a really insightful comment. It actually makes me think about this whole thing in a new way. And that's more than just a compliment, right? It means their words genuinely shifted your own thinking.
Precisely. An insight is like a flash of clarity. It often connects bits of information that seem totally unrelated before. And acknowledging someone's insight, it doesn't just validate their thinking, their contribution. It actually encourages them to share more of that deeper thinking, makes the conversation richer, more stimulating for both of you. You're moving beyond just nodding politely to actual intellectual engagement.
Okay, next up, empathy. Now, this is often confused with sympathy, but it's different. Sympathy is feeling sorry for someone. Empathy is deeper. It's that ability to genuinely understand and maybe even share the feelings of another person. It's really trying to put yourself in their shoes, walk that mile in their emotional world. So if a friend says they're just completely snowed under with work and family stuff, you might say, oh, wow, I feel such empathy for you. That sounds incredibly tough, really exhausting. You're not just hearing the words, you're trying to connect with the feeling behind them.
Empathy. You could argue it's the absolute bedrock of all deep human connection. When you express empathy, you're not just saying, I hear you. You're saying, I feel with you. Even if you haven't been in that exact same boat, you're building an emotional bridge. You're signaling that their feelings are valid, they matter, they're understood. And that creates this immediate sense of psychological safety, which is just essential for any real meaningful dialogue. It turns what feels like a solo struggle into something shared.
And here's a big one, often tricky for people in any language: vulnerability. This is that courageous willingness to be open, exposed, to share something personal, maybe a fear, a mistake, a struggle that feels difficult or uncomfortable. It's opening yourself up potentially to judgment or misunderstanding, but doing it anyway. And acknowledging their courage is huge. It's like, wow, it takes a lot of vulnerability to talk about your struggles like that. I really appreciate you sharing.
Vulnerability is scary, no doubt. It means letting your guard down. But it's also incredibly powerful. It's how we truly see each other and how we allow ourselves to be seen. And often when one person takes that step, shows vulnerability, it kind of creates this ripple effect. It makes a space feel safer for the other person to do the same. It's not just about showing weakness, it's about showing real courage. And seeing that courage in someone else, it often triggers something in us, makes us feel safer to be vulnerable too. It's this positive cycle of openness that's just fundamental for building deep, real trust.
Okay, what about assumption? This is what we just presume is true, right? Without actual proof or someone explicitly saying it, it's like the silent agreements we make in our heads. For example, maybe in a meeting, you could say, hang on, I think we might be making an assumption here that everyone's on board with this plan, but we haven't actually heard from everybody yet. Using the word helps bring those unspoken things out into the open for discussion.
Oh yeah, unchecked assumptions. Yeah, they're notorious for derailing conversations, causing misunderstandings, especially across different cultures or even just different departments at work. Naming an assumption, bringing it into the light, allows it to be looked at, questioned, clarified. And that's crucial for actually moving forward together and building a shared understanding. It stops problems before they even start sometimes.
And then there's belief. These are our core convictions, yeah. The fundamental truths we hold about ourselves, others, the world. Like, my personal belief is that everyone deserves a second chance, regardless of past mistakes.
Talking about beliefs isn't really about who's right or wrong. It's about understanding the framework someone operates from, which often leads us to.
Exactly. Beliefs are often really deeply held. They profoundly influence how we act, react, how we interpret things. Discussing someone's beliefs, it can give you a fundamental understanding of what drives them, what they stand for, how they make sense of the world. It's like finding the key to their internal compass, which is values. What's genuinely important to us, the principles that guide our decisions, our behavior, like honesty and integrity. Those are two of my core values in any relationship, personal or professional. Or if you want to invite someone else deeper, you could ask, what do you value most in a friendship and why? These are the guiding principles that really shape a person's life choices.
Values really are the compass points, aren't they? The North Stars we navigate by. When you understand someone's values, you get insight into their priorities, their moral code, what truly matters to them deep down. It's such a crucial step towards really understanding someone, appreciating the why behind what they do and choose.
And mindset. This is about someone's established way of thinking, right? Their attitudes may be fixed, maybe growth-oriented. It shapes how they perceive things, react to things. You might observe maybe he seems to have a real growth mindset. Challenges always look like learning opportunities to him. It sort of frames how someone approaches pretty much everything, from solving problems to personal growth.
Yeah, our mindset really dictates how we see and react to the world. Talking about it can reveal these underlying patterns of thought, emotional responses, which is incredibly insightful for understanding someone's whole approach to life. It's like getting a peek at the operating system of their internal world.
Okay, and finally, takeaway. This is the main lesson, right? The key insight or piece of wisdom you get from an experience. My biggest takeaway from that really difficult workshop was just how important active listening is, something I definitely need to work on. It's not just about what happened, but the meaning you took from it.
Exactly. The takeaway distills the essence of an experience into something useful, memorable knowledge, or a lesson learned. Asking about someone's takeaway, or sharing your own, shows that you're actively processing, extracting meaning. You're turning just an event into a valuable learning moment. It signals that desire for growth and reflection, both in yourself and in the person you're talking with.
Now, it's not just about these nouns, these concepts, the verbs we choose. They're just as powerful, maybe even more so sometimes. We're talking about verbs that actively show reflection, engagement, connection. They're not passive words. They signal something happening internally. Think about verbs like to assume, to believe, to wonder, to reflect on, to realize, to relate to empathize with, and to open up.
Absolutely. When you consciously pick these verbs, you're explicitly signaling, hey, I want to go deeper here. I'm actively engaging with your thoughts, your feelings. Just think about the difference. Saying, he did that versus, I wonder why he did that. The second one shows you're thinking, you're curious, you're analyzing. It invites more exploration. Or saying, I'm still reflecting on what you said earlier. That shows you're actively processing the information, not just letting it wash over you. It shows respect for their input. These verbs, they don't just describe an action, they describe cognitive and emotional process. They actively tell the other person, I'm engaging with your ideas, your feelings on a deeper level. They show you're not just passively listening, but actively participating in making meaning together.
And then we have adjectives, not just any adjectives, but ones that really enrich our descriptions of ideas and feelings, adding depth and precision. Words like insightful, thought-provoking, compelling, genuine, authentic. Instead of just a bland, yeah, that was a good point, imagine the difference if you say, wow, that was an incredibly insightful point, or your story was truly compelling. It lands differently, doesn't it?
The power of these specific adjectives, it lies in their ability to validate, to precisely describe those deeper thoughts and emotions. When you call someone's idea thought-provoking, you're not just being polite, you're actually saying their words stimulated your thinking, maybe challenged your perspective, opened up new ways of understanding. Using these words really elevates the quality of the shared experience. It acknowledges the depth of what's being discussed or felt. It adds this layer of precision, appreciation, intellectual respect that, simpler adjectives just can't deliver. It signals you're paying attention to the quality of the ideas, not just noticing they exist.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, especially for those of you who, like me, kind of geek out on the mechanics of language. This section is for you. Deeper conversations, they often venture into the hypothetical, right? The speculative, the reflective. We find ourselves exploring what-if scenarios, thinking about how the past could have been different, pondering future possibilities that aren't necessarily guaranteed. And this means our grammar, the tools we use, needs to be able to handle that complexity. We simply can't just rely on basic present or past tenses if we want to really get into these nuanced possibilities, these imaginative realms.
That's such a brilliant point. These specific grammatical structures, they aren't just random rules from a textbook. They are incredibly powerful pathways, tools really, that unlock much richer dialogue. They give us the sort of linguistic scaffolding we need to move beyond just stating facts. They let us enter the realm of dreams, regrets, possibilities, what-ifs, which are so often right at the heart of meaningful connection and getting real insight. They give us the precision to talk about complex thoughts that go beyond just the here and now.
And the first major tool in this kit is the conditional. This is the structure that really opens up that whole world of what if. Conditionals are just perfect for exploring scenarios, possibilities, even things that didn't actually happen, but we can imagine counterfactuals.
Conditionals are fantastic, truly. because they invite imagination, speculation, deep reflection. They shift the conversation away from just fixed reality into this more fluid space, a space where ideas can be played with, consequences explored, alternatives considered. And that kind of speculative thinking is just central to a deep conversation. It lets us probe values, motivations, the why behind decisions, past and future.
Let's start with the second conditional. This one's for hypothetical situations in the present or future. Things that are generally unlikely, maybe even a bit dreamlike, but they're incredibly revealing and often fun to consider. The structure is pretty straightforward. If plus simple past, then blood plus the base form of the verb. So that classic question, if you had all the money in the world, what would you do?
Right. And this question, it isn't really about money at all, is it? It's not a financial planning question. Framed with that second conditional, it's a brilliant way to get someone talking about their deepest values, their aspirations. It asks them to think about what truly drives them, what their biggest dreams are, what kind of impact they'd want to make if all those practical limits, like money, just vanished. It bypasses the everyday stuff and invites a conversation about their core self, their ideals, maybe their sense of purpose. It asks for their fantasy, which can often tell you more than their current reality.
Exactly. Or think about this one. What would you change if you were the leader of your country? Again, it's not really asking about specific policies or election promises. It's getting at their ideals for society, their vision of fairness or equality or progress. It shifts the talk from practical day-to-day worries to more imaginative, value-driven thinking. It invites them to share their kind of philosophical outlook. It's amazing how just tweaking the grammar can unlock such deeper discussions.
And this is exactly where we often see a common mistake, but one that really limits the depth. A lot of learners, and honestly, even native speakers sometimes in casual chat, might instinctively use the first conditional here. They might ask something like, what will you do if you have more money? Or, what will you change if you are the leader?
Okay, so unpack that for us. Why is what would you do if you had all the money so much deeper, potentially, than what will you do if you have more money? What's the real difference there? It seems subtle.
Well, the first conditional. What will you do if you have more money? Or what will you change if you are the leader? It talks about a real, or at least a plausible, future possibility. It's grounded in reality and practicality. So it tends to get a factual, pragmatic answer. Oh, if I have more money, I'll pay off my student loans and maybe buy a new car. Which is fine. It's a perfectly normal answer, but doesn't really open things up much beyond that, does it? It keeps the conversation in the realm of the practical, the tangible. But the second conditional, what would you do if you had all the money? Or what would you change if you were the leader? That invites dreaming. It asks you to explore a hypothetical situation that's explicitly unlikely right now. You don't have all the money. You probably aren't going to be the leader tomorrow. And that slight detachment from immediate reality, that's precisely what allows the conversation to shift. It moves from the practical to the imaginative, from just facts to real reflection. It frees the speaker from the chains of realism, invites them to share their deepest desires, their core values, their vision without constraints. It's a really key distinction, and it unlocks a much more profound, more inviting kind of discussion. One is about plans, the other is about ideals.
Okay, let's unpack this next one even more. Imagine you're kind of replaying a moment from the past, but maybe with a different script, a different outcome. That's what the third conditional lets us do. This one is specifically for hypothetical situations in the past. Things that didn't happen, but we can reflect on how they could have turned out differently. The structure here is, if plus past perfect had plus past participle, then way would have plus past participle.
This is an incredibly powerful tool for reflection, for analysis, for insight. It lets us explore the consequences of things that didn't happen, consider alternative histories, and really learn from decisions already made. So if someone shares a past regret, instead of just saying, oh, that's too bad, you could ask, if you had known that information back then, would you have done things differently? Now, this isn't about blaming or getting stuck in the past unhealthily. It's about extracting wisdom. It's about understanding the journey someone's been on, the pivotal moments that shaped who they are now.
Right. It allows for really insightful reflection on choices made, potential regrets, and maybe the crucial lessons learned from those past experiences. It's like saying, okay, let's mentally go back to that exact moment, but let's give ourselves this new piece of information and see what changes in the story. It really encourages a thoughtful look back at past decisions, pulling deeper meaning from them. It signals you're interested in their learning from the past, not just hearing the story again.
And that kind of reflective self-analysis, It's incredibly valuable for personal growth, for building resilience, for understanding the complex path someone has walked. It moves beyond just recounting what happened to deeply analyzing why it happened, how it felt at the time, and what impact different choices might have had. It can even be a way to process difficult things like grief or disappointment, or maybe even celebrate unexpected positive outcomes that came from tough past choices. It gives a framework for processing complex emotional history.
Okay, moving on from conditionals. Let's talk about modal verbs for speculation. These aren't just about grammar rules. They're about showing you're actively thinking about what the other person said, not just passively receiving it. They let you process, infer, engage with what you've heard. They show you're really paying attention.
Yes, these verbs are wonderful because they convey empathy. They show a genuine attempt to understand someone's experience, even if it's not something you've personally gone through. They show you're not just hearing words, you're trying to step into their shoes, imagine their reality. They signal this effort to connect on a level deeper than just surface facts.
One of the most useful ones is must have for making a strong deduction about the past. This isn't just a random guess, it's a strong inference based on the evidence or the context they've given you. So if someone tells you they packed up, left their family, moved to a new country completely alone, you might respond with, wow, that must have been really challenging. You're making a compassionate deduction based on how inherently difficult that experience sounds.
Exactly. Now, compare that to just saying, oh, that was difficult. The second one is just a simple statement of fact, almost a bit flat, right? But the first one, that must have been difficult, shows so much more. It shows empathy, it shows speculation, it shows you're genuinely trying to imagine yourself in their situation, feel what they might have felt. It's such a key part of connection because it shows deep understanding and a willingness to kind of share their emotional space. It's a really powerful way to validate someone's experience and signal you're truly connecting. Though a quick note, the tone is crucial here. You wouldn't want to say, you must have been crazy. That's judgmental. It needs to convey empathy.
Good point. Then we have might have or could have. These are for expressing a possibility in the past or maybe offering an alternative explanation. So if a friend says, he didn't answer my text, I'm starting to worry, you could gently offer, well, he might have been busy, or maybe he could have been in a meeting with no phone signal. It offers gentle alternatives, stops you both from jumping straight to the worst conclusion.
These verbs really demonstrate nuanced thinking. They show you're not rushing to judgment or making assumptions about why someone did something or what motivated them. By suggesting a possibility, an alternative explanation, you create a safer, more open space for the conversation. You're not asserting, this is what happened. You're exploring possibilities together. And this kind of careful, nuanced language, it builds trust. It shows you're considering different angles, not quick to judge or demand answers. It encourages the other person to maybe elaborate or clarify without feeling attacked or pressured. Makes the conversation feel more collaborative, less like an interrogation. It allows for the messiness and complexity of real life.
Okay, so we've got some good vocabulary now, and these powerful grammar tools like conditionals and modals. But let's be really honest here. The quality of any conversation, especially a deep one, it almost entirely comes down to the quality of the questions you ask. You can have all the right words, the perfect grammar, but if you're not asking questions that actually invite depth, you're probably going to stay stuck on the surface, just skimming along.
That is profoundly true. Think of questions like keys. A closed question. It's like a tiny, simple key. It only opens a tiny lock. It gets you a yes or a no, or maybe a very short, factual answer. Quick, efficient maybe, but it closes the door to more exploration. An open question, though, that's like a master key. It unlocks a whole room. It invites exploration, detail, stories. It's an invitation to share a perspective, an emotion, a narrative.
Let's use that classic example. Closed question. Did you have a good day? What's the usual answer? Yes. Or no, maybe, it was okay. And that's often, right? Conversation over, you've hit a conversational dead end. A wall.
And that is exactly where so many potentially great conversations just fizzle out. It's almost painful to watch sometimes. Now, contrast that with an open question. Something like, what was the best part of your day? Or maybe, what was the most challenging part today? That completely changes the dynamic. It invites a story, a detailed response, a deeper look. You're much more likely to get something like, well, actually, this really interesting thing happened at work, or, oh man, the commute was a nightmare, but I learned something from it, and boom. Suddenly you have a real narrative to engage with, a thread you can follow.
It's such a crucial difference, isn't it? Because open questions, they really are the gateway to depth. You just can't answer them with a single word, usually. They demand a bit of thought, some reflection, and they almost always invite a story or a detailed explanation. They signal, hey, I'm genuinely interested in your experience, not just a quick fact.
Exactly. They signal you're interested in the why and the how, the meaning, the experience, not just the what. They gently encourage the other person to share their perspectives, their feelings, rather than just facts or simple yes-no answers. They create space for vulnerability, for deeper sharing, because they imply you're actually prepared to listen to more than just a quick soundbite.
Okay, so let's look at some essential phrases, specific questions designed to generate that depth, to guide the conversation into richer territory. First, for exploring feelings and perspectives. Simple, but incredibly powerful. How did that make you feel? Or to get into their thinking process, what's your perspective on that situation? Or even, maybe more introspective, what's really going through your mind as you think about this?
These questions are like direct invitations into someone's inner world, their emotional world, their intellectual world. They explicitly show you're interested in their subjective experience, and that's where the real connection happens. They skillfully steer the conversation away from just the external events towards the internal processing, how they interpreted it, how they felt, their judgments. They basically give permission for the other person to be vulnerable and share what's really going on inside.
Okay, next category, exploring motivations and values. This gets to the core of why people do the things they do. What was the motivation behind that decision you made? Goes beyond just the action to the reason, the driving force. Or what do you value most in a friendship? And why do those things matter so much to you?
These questions directly tap into their core beliefs, what truly matters to them. Understanding motivations and values. It's like understanding the engine or the operating system of a person's choices and behavior. These questions skillfully guide the conversation towards those core beliefs, what really drives them. And that gives you profound insight into their character, their principles, their personal philosophy. They don't just ask what someone did, but why they did it and what it really meant to them.
And finally, questions for exploring learning and growth. Because deep conversations often lead to insights, to self-discovery. What was the biggest takeaway for you from that whole experience? This encourages reflection, finding the wisdom in it. Or how has that event changed you as a person? What have you learned about yourself since then? This invites a discussion about personal evolution, maybe resilience.
These questions are incredibly effective. They encourage someone to process their experiences, turning simple events into valuable lessons, opportunities for self-awareness. They help consolidate learning and allow for this really rich discussion about personal development, adaptability, resilience. They signal you're not just interested in their past stories, but in their ongoing journey of growth and change.
Now, here's a phrase that isn't technically a question, but oh my goodness, it might be the most powerful, understated invitation for someone to keep talking, just simply. Tell me more about that. So simple, but so potent.
It truly is magical, isn't it? Because it's so open-ended, it's completely non-directive, it instantly creates space for the other person to elaborate, it subtly validates what they've already said, like your words are important, worthy of more attention, and it gives them total control over where the story goes next. It shows genuine, pure interest without directing them, interrupting them, or putting words in their mouth. It's just a green light for deeper sharing. A gentle nudge that says, I'm interested, I'm here, keep going.
Okay, so a truly deep conversation. It isn't just about asking clever questions or speaking eloquently. In fact, I'd probably argue it's maybe 50% talking, but 50%, maybe even more, listening. But not just passively sitting there, waiting for your turn to jump in. We mean active listening, a dynamic, engaged process.
That's such a critical distinction, and it's where a lot of people, even with the best intentions, kind of fall short. Active listening genuinely means not planning your next killer sentence in your head while the other person is still talking. It means a real mental shift. Your brain goes from, what brilliant thing will I say next, to, what are they really trying to communicate here? What's the feeling underneath? What's the unspoken message? It's about being fully present, truly focusing on what's being said, both the words and the nonverbal stuff. In English, we show this not just with, good eye contact, nodding, and open posture, but also with very specific verbal signals that reassure the speaker they're being heard.
Exactly. Those verbal signals, sometimes called continuers, little verbal nudges, basically saying, yep, I'm with you, I'm following, please keep going. It's a way to signal, I'm engaged, I get it, don't stop now, you have my full attention. Simple sounds or words like, ah, okay, right, or just go on.
And then, Beyond those small signals, there's the incredibly powerful technique of paraphrasing, restating what the person said, but in your own words. Using phrases like, okay, so if I'm understanding you correctly, you felt X because Y happened. Or, it sounds like what you're saying is Z, is that right? This is immensely powerful. It doesn't just show you heard the sounds they made. It proves you genuinely grasped their meaning, the emotional weight, the significance. It's about really hearing and understanding, not just waiting for your turn. And this builds a huge amount of trust because the speaker feels truly seen, accurately understood. Plus, it gives them a chance to correct you if you misunderstood.
Okay, so let's go over some essential phrases you can use to explicitly show you are actively listening. These are phrases that validate what the other person is saying, make them feel heard and understood, like simply, I hear you, or that makes perfect sense.
I hear you. It's not just about acknowledging sound waves hitting your ears, is it? It's a profound acknowledgement of their feeling, their viewpoint, the logic they're presenting. That makes sense, or that makes perfect sense. It validates their logic or their feelings. It signals their perspective is legitimate, understandable. These phrases create that safe psychological space for more sharing because the speaker feels like their contribution is valued, maybe even intellectually appreciated.
And then really leaning into the empathy, I can completely see why you'd feel that way. Or,
Yeah.
wow, that sounds incredible. Then you insert an adjective like frustrating, exhilarating, overwhelming, liberating. Choosing the right adjective there shows you really got the emotional nuance.
They absolutely do. These phrases show you're not just listening to the words, but actively connecting on an emotional level. By adding that precise adjective, frustrating, exhilarating, you're showing you haven't just heard the story, but you've grasped the emotional tone, the significance of their experience. And that's critical for building deep rapport, encouraging even deeper sharing. It confirms you're really tuned into their inner world.
And finally, just explicit phrases to encourage them to continue, signaling you're invested in their story. Simple ones like, go on, or, and then what happened? And the classic, just reassuring, I'm listening.
These are gentle but firm nudges. They're like permission slips for the other person to elaborate without feeling rushed or judged. Go on is understated, but it's a powerful way of saying, I'm fully invested, tell me more. And then what happened? Shows genuine curiosity about where the story is going, and I'm listening is just a direct, unwavering confirmation of your attention. All of these build that atmosphere of trust, make the speaker feel truly heard, and empower them to open up more, share the richness of their experience.
Now, here's a really crucial point, something we absolutely have to emphasize. A deep conversation is not an interrogation. It is a mutual exchange. It's a two-way street. After all this fantastic listening and skillful questioning we've talked about, it's just as important, maybe even more important sometimes, that you are willing to share your own stuff too. Your own experiences, your vulnerabilities, your perspectives. Reciprocity isn't just polite. It's the very essence of genuine connection.
You have absolutely hit on something fundamental there. Vulnerability especially, it just has to be a two-way street. If you're asking someone else to open up, to step into that vulnerable space, you really have to be willing to do the same yourself. Sharing your own story, your struggles, your insights, it's not only key to building an authentic, balanced connection, but it also signals that you trust them. It gives them a chance to connect with your experience, creating that profound sense of shared humanity, mutual understanding. It shows you're human, too, with your own messy bits.
Okay, so let's look at some essential phrases for sharing your story in a way that deepens the connection rather than just, hijacking the conversation. First, ways to connect with the other person's experience, bridging their story to yours. You could say, that reminds me of a time when that instantly builds a bridge between their experience and yours. Or, oh, I can totally relate to that feeling. I once experienced something similar when I...
These phrases are incredibly powerful. They create such a deep sense of shared humanity, shared understanding. You're not stealing their thunder or making it all about you. You're showing them they're not alone in what they went through or how they feel. It's a way of saying, I get it, because I've kind of been there too. And that fosters this profound sense of mutual recognition, solidarity. It validates their experience by echoing it in your own life.
Okay, then. How do you offer your perspective without accidentally shutting down or invalidating the other person? This is so crucial for keeping the dialogue collaborative. You can start with phrases like, from my perspective, or the way I see it is slightly different because... This clearly frames your view as one perspective, not the only truth. Or, that's a really interesting point and I appreciate you sharing it. For me, it lands a bit differently because this acknowledges their contribution first, then offers your own view.
This is all about fostering constructive dialogue, intellectual humility. These phrases let you contribute your thoughts, your insights, your unique viewpoint, while explicitly respecting and acknowledging the other person's perspective. You're adding richness to the conversation, maybe building on what they've shared, rather than just contradicting them or starting a debate. It helps maintain that open, collaborative vibe that encourages more sharing, more understanding, rather than making people defensive. It's about expanding the shared understanding, not winning an argument.
And finally, maybe the most impactful category, phrases to show vulnerability yourself. This is where you really open up, let your guard down, and invite that deeper trust. Phrases like, to be honest, I've really struggled with that exact same thing myself. It's been a tough journey. Or, I'm still figuring it out myself, and honestly, sometimes I feel just as lost as anyone else.
These are incredibly powerful for building authentic trust and rapport. When you admit you've struggled, that you don't have all the answers, that you're imperfect, you instantly become more relatable, more human, more trustworthy. It invites the other person to feel safer in their own uncertainties. It opens the door for a truly authentic exchange, where you're both just kind of navigating the complexities of life together. It changes the dynamic from, say, expert learner or speaker listener to just two human beings sharing their journeys, flaws and all. It's a real invitation to shared humanity.
All right, wow, we've covered a remarkable amount of ground today. From building that richer vocabulary for connection to mastering those nuanced grammar tools, the conditionals, the modals that let us explore complex ideas. We've talked about the art of asking those open, powerful questions that really invite depth. And maybe most importantly, how to genuinely practice active listening and how to share your own story authentically, creating that vital two-way street. Now, let's see how all these pieces can actually fit together in a real flowing conversation. We're going to walk through a dialogue between two people, let's call them Chloe and Leo, and we'll point out exactly where these techniques pop up and help build depth.
Yeah, this is where the theory hits the road, right?
Yeah.
You'll see how these language choices can weave together pretty seamlessly to create a natural flow towards depth, empathy, and real connection. Pay attention to how each speaker kind of builds on what the other person says, moving beyond just surface chat.
Okay, so Chloe starts. I had a really, really tough week at work. Just one of those weeks where nothing seemed to go right, Leo responds. Oh no, I'm genuinely sorry to hear that. That sounds incredibly frustrating. What happened, if you don't mind me asking? I'm listening.
Okay, right there, Leo does a few things beautifully. He starts with validation, acknowledging her feeling. Incredibly frustrating. Then he uses that crucial open question, what happened? Which invites the story. Adding, wait, if you don't mind me asking, shows that respect. Avoids sounding intrusive. And finishing with, I'm listening, that's a clear continuer, a signal of readiness to hear her out.
Chloe then says, well, my boss unexpectedly rejected a major project I'd been pouring a month of my life into. I just feel so completely defeated, like all that effort was for nothing, and now I have to go back to the drawing board. Leo comes back with, wow, a whole month of dedicated work just to have it rejected. That must have been absolutely devastating, Chloe. I can only imagine how soul-crushing that feels. I can totally see why you'd feel defeated and burnt out.
Okay, here, Leo really doubles down the empathy. He uses that modal verb for strong deduction about the past. That must have been absolutely devastating. He's making a strong, empathetic inference about her likely emotional state. He's trying to imagine it from her side. He even adds, I can only imagine how soul-crushing that feels, for extra punch. Then, he reinforces it with a clear validation phrase. I can totally see why you'd feel defeated and burnt out, using those precise adjectives to mirror her feelings and really make her feel understood.
Chloe replies, it was. It really was. And the worst part is, I truly believed in the core idea, but now I'm not sure what to do next or how to pick myself up and start again. It makes me question everything. Leo responds, that's a really challenging place to be. Speaking of the core idea, if you were to approach this entire project again with the benefit of hindsight and knowing what you know now, would you do anything differently in terms of how you presented it, or do you still believe completely in the original concept as it was?
Bam! That's a fantastic use of the second conditional. If you were to approach this, would you do anything differently? Leo is skillfully inviting Chloe into that hypothetical space. He's encouraging reflection on her choices, her beliefs, not just letting her dwell on the setback. This isn't about blame, it's about thoughtful analysis, extracting towards future possibilities or understanding.
Chloe says, That's actually a really good and tough question. I still believe deeply in the core idea, absolutely. But maybe the way I framed it or the initial research I presented wasn't as compelling or persuasive as it needed to be. I think I made some assumptions about what my boss already knew, and Leo says. That makes a lot of sense. That reminds me of a time when I had a proposal rejected, not because the idea was bad, but because I hadn't clearly articulated how it aligned with the team's long term goals. My biggest takeaway from that experience was that even a brilliant idea needs to be translated into the specific language of your audience's priorities. From my perspective, sometimes it's less about the idea itself and more about how effectively you connect it to the bigger picture and the stakeholders' values.
Wow, Leo really packs a lot into that turn. First, validation. That makes a lot of sense, affirming Chloe's thinking. Then, beautifully, he shares his own perspective and vulnerability with, that reminds me of a time when creating that shared experience, building rapport, he immediately connects his story to hers by identifying his biggest takeaway, showing he reflected and learned from his own past setback. And finally, he offers his perspective using, from my perspective, framing it as his view, not the absolute truth, showing that reciprocity and building on the conversation with a new angle for Chloe.
Chloe finishes with, you are absolutely right. I hadn't really thought about it that way, about aligning it with their larger priorities. I was so focused on the technical details. That's actually a very insightful point, Leo, and it really shifts my thinking. Thank you for that.
Hmm.
And Leo closes that part with, of course, Chloe, I'm glad it helps. And remember, I'm here if you want to brainstorm some new angles or just talk through it more. No pressure.
And notice how Chloe acknowledges Leo's contribution using that powerful adjective, insightful point. That validates his input significantly. And Leo's final statement, I'm here if you want to brainstorm, it shows ongoing support, openness for future connection. It's not demanding, it's just an open invitation. It reinforces their connection and leaves the door open, potentially turning this one conversation into part of an ongoing supportive relationship.
So what really stands out to you here, when you look at that exchange, it's not just a checklist of techniques, is it?
No, not at all. If we connect this back to the bigger picture, what's striking is how seamless it feels, how Leo organically moves from showing deep empathy to asking a genuinely reflective, challenging question, then sharing his own relevant experience and the wisdom gained from it, and finally offering a valuable perspective without being judgmental. And all throughout, he's consistently using language that signals engagement and understanding. It's a perfect little model of how you can move a conversation from just stating a problem to creating a space of shared understanding, personal insight, and maybe even potential solutions. This feels truly collaborative, like a shared journey of figuring things out.
Okay, let's quickly touch on pronunciation, because speaking clearly is also really key for connection, right? It helps ensure your message, especially when you're trying to be empathetic or maybe vulnerable, lands exactly the way you intend it without any accidental confusion. A mispronounced word can sometimes just break the flow of a deep moment.
Absolutely. Clear pronunciation isn't just about sounding correct. It's about conveying your meaning, your emotion, with precision. It ensures that the depth you're aiming for isn't lost because someone didn't quite catch the word. Let's just practice a few of those key terms we talked about today. First one, vulnerable. Listen closely. It's V-U-L nurubul. Notice the stress is right there on the first syllable. V-U-L. The middle sound is soft. Try saying it slowly. V-U-L nurubul. It carries weight, this word, so clear pronunciation helps.
V-U-L nurubul. Got it.
Okay. Next, perspective. This one is perspective. Perspective. The stress is clearly on that second syllable. Spec. A common slip-up is stressing the first. Listen again. Perspective. Practice. Perspective helps people know you meet viewpoints.
What's perspective feel? Right.
Then we have empathy. This is empathy. Empathy. Emphasis clearly on the first syllable, E-M. And it's a softer sound at the end, not a hard try it. Empathy. You want this word to sound smooth, reflecting the connection.
Empathy. Okay.
And genuine. It's genuine. Genuine. Stress on the first syllable, genu, like general, genu, a common word, but easy to stumble on. Try it. Genuine. You want your pronunciation to sound authentic when you use this word.
Genuine. Makes sense.
And finally, insightful. This one is pronounced insightful. Insightful, the stress is on the second syllable, S-A-T, which has that long A sound. Say it. Insightful. This word carries intellectual weight, so clear pronunciation helps your compliment land effectively.
Insightful. Got it.
Just practicing these few can make a difference. It helps you sound more confident, more articulate, but more importantly, it ensures that the profound meaning, the emotional intent behind your words gets communicated fully. And that goes a really long way in these deeper conversations. It's all about precision in communication.
Well, that brings us towards the end of our exploration today into the language of deeper conversations. We've covered a lot, from building that richer vocabulary for connection to getting comfortable with grammar tools like conditionals and modals for exploring complex ideas. We talked about asking those open, powerful questions that invite stories, not just facts. And maybe most importantly, how to really practice active listening with everything you've got, and how to bravely share your own story too, making it that vital two-way street.
And remember, these aren't just abstract ideas for a classroom. They're practical tools you can start using in your English conversations, like today. The great thing is, you don't need to master everything all at once. Even just one small shift, trying one new thing, can make a huge difference.
So here's a little challenge for you. For your very next English conversation, just consciously try asking at least one open question where maybe you'd normally ask a closed one. So instead of, did you like the movie, which usually gets a yes/no, try asking, what was your favorite part of the movie? What made it stand out for you? Just notice how that one small change might shift the dynamic, invite a story instead of just a single word.
And for practicing active listening, maybe next time you're listening to an English podcast or an interview, or even just overhearing a conversation, when someone tells a story or expresses a strong feeling, just pause it for a second. Then, practice saying a validation phrase out loud, just to yourself. Something like, wow, that sounds really interesting, or okay, I can see why they'd feel that way. It's a simple exercise, but it builds that muscle, gets you ready to respond empathetically in real time.
And remember, the goal here, it isn't about becoming a therapist or trying to dissect every single interaction. It's really just about being a bit more authentically human in your exchanges, being a more engaged friend, a more understanding colleague. The language, when you get down to it, it's just the bridge. A beautifully complex and nuanced bridge, maybe, but it's the bridge that connects one human heart, one human mind to another. It allows that real understanding, that real connection to actually flow between people.
It really is about building those bridges. One word, one question, one moment of genuine listening at a time.
And that's our topic for today. If you enjoyed this content and found these insights valuable, don't forget to explore the other videos on our channel to continue your English practice and explore more fascinating topics.